town was small, hardly more than a scattering of wooden buildings along a single street. The saloon doors swung open with the noise of laughter spilling into the night. But Cole had no interest in cards or whiskey. He tied his horse at the post and stepped inside anyway, scanning the room out of habit. His eyes moved past the rowdy gamblers, past the piano man thumping out a tired tune, past the smoke that curled toward the rafters, and then his gaze stopped. She was sitting near the far wall, a woman with dark hair that fell loose around her shoulders, her hands folded tightly in her lap, as though she were bracing herself against the weight of the world. Her dress was plain, worn at the seams, but her eyes carried something more precious than jewels, a depth of fear and longing intertwined. She looked like she didn't belong there, and maybe she didn't. Cole knew the type, a woman running from something, or toward something she couldn't yet name. He took a seat at the bar, ordered black coffee, and tried not to stare, but it was useless. Something about her drew him in, something fragile and fierce all at once. When she finally looked up, their eyes met, and time seemed to still. She didn't look away immediately. No, she held his gaze for a long moment, and in that moment, Cole felt the kind of pull that no whiskey, no trail, no sunset could ever give him. Eventually she rose, her movements nervous but determined, and walked past him toward the door. Cole hesitated only a heartbeat before following. The night air was cooler outside, the lantern by the saloon flickering against the wind. She stood near the hitching post, her hands twisting in the folds of her dress, her eyes cast down. Cole stopped a few steps away, giving her space, his voice low when he finally spoke. "You don't look like you belong here." She lifted her head, startled, her lips parting as though she wanted to deny it. But instead she whispered, "Maybe I don't belong anywhere." The word struck him, sharp and aching. He stepped closer, careful, like a man approaching a wild horse. "Where are you headed?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "Nowhere, just away." Her voice cracked on the last word, and Cole felt something tighten in his chest. He could see the fear behind her eyes, the shadows of nights she hadn't wanted to endure, and he knew she was carrying scars no one could see. "What's your name?" he asked gently. For a long moment she hesitated, her lips trembling, before she whispered, "Lila." Cole repeated it softly, as though tasting it for the first time. Lila. It was a name too soft for a place this hard, too gentle for a life that had likely been cruel. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not empty. Finally, she whispered something that made his heart clench. "I've never shared a bed," she said, her voice barely audible, carrying more than just inexperience. It carried the weight of loneliness, of a life where safety had never been offered, where trust had always been broken. Cole's throat tightened. He didn't smile, didn't laugh, didn't treat it like a confession to be pitied. Instead, he stepped close enough that the warmth of his body cut through the cold night, his hand lifting slowly to brush a strand of hair from her cheek. His voice came soft, rough with emotion. "Then share mine forever." The words slipped from him like a vow, unexpected even to himself, but true in a way that nothing else had ever been. Lila's eyes widened, shimmering with tears she fought to hold back. She wanted to laugh, to tell him he was a fool, but the look in his eyes stopped her. There was no mockery there, no cruelty, only a quiet strength, a promise she'd never heard before. For the first time in her life, she believed someone meant the words they spoke. That night, he didn't take her back inside the saloon. He didn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. He simply offered her his hand, and when she placed hers in his, he led her to his horse. Together they rode out of town, the night vast and endless around them, the stars watching silently. Cole brought her to the small cabin he called home, a place tucked deep in the valley, safe and far from prying eyes. The cabin was simple, a single room, a hearth, a bed against the wall, a table scarred with use, but to Lila, it felt like a sanctuary. She stood inside, trembling, clutching the blanket he handed her, her eyes darting around as though afraid it might vanish if she blinked. Cole watched her quietly, his heart heavier than he expected. He knew what it meant for her to be here, to trust him even a little. He didn't push, didn't crowd her. He simply built a fire, set a kettle over the flames, and said softly, "You're safe here." For hours they sat in silence, the crackle of the fire filling the room. Lila curled beneath the blanket, her body shaking with the weight of emotions she couldn't name. And Cole sat nearby, his presence steady and sure, when at last she whispered, "No one's ever meant that when they said it." Cole turned his head slowly, his voice steady as stone. I do. Her tears came then, unstoppable, and she buried her face in her hands. Cole didn't move, didn't press. He simply sat there, a quiet guardian in the firelight, a man who understood pain because he carried his own. As she drifted into sleep at last, her head resting against the blanket, Cole whispered into the quiet, "Then share mine forever," and in his heart, he knew it was more than a promise, it was destiny. The days after Lila stepped into Cole's cabin stretched slow, almost dreamlike, as if the outside world had been held at bay by the valley's quiet. For the first time in years, she woke without fear of footsteps outside her door, without the weight of expectation pressing down on her. Cole kept his promise from that first night. He gave her space, gave her silence when she needed it, but also gave her the steady presence of a man who had no intention of leaving. He chopped wood in the mornings, worked on the fences, tended the horse, and sometimes just sat on the porch, whittling wood as the sun slid across the sky. Lila watched him when she thought he didn't notice, marveling at the way his strength was tempered by patience, his silence filled not with distance but with depth. But as peace settled over her, fear began to whisper again. Peace, she had learned, never lasted. The past had sharp teeth and it always found a way to bite. One evening, as the sky burned orange and the first stars crept into the horizon, she found herself sitting by the fire inside the cabin, her hands curled around a mug of coffee Cole had poured for her. The warmth soothed her fingers, but her heart beat heavy in her chest. She looked up at him, standing near the hearth, his profile carved by firelight, and her voice broke the silence. "I don't understand you," she whispered. Cole's eyes flicked to hers, calm but curious. "What don't you understand? Why you'd want me here? Why you'd say what you said? I've never shared a bed. I've never been someone worth keeping. Men don't say things like that unless they want something." Her voice cracked at the end, her shame raw and visible. Cole set down the kettle, wiped his hands on his shirt, and crossed the room slowly. He crouched in front of her, his gaze holding hers with a steadiness that rooted her to the spot. "Lila," he said softly, "you've been told lies so long. You've started to believe them. But listen to me now. I don't want a night. I don't want half of you. I want all of you, not just for now. For as long as you'll have me." His voice dropped even lower, the words almost a vow. "Then share mine forever." Her throat tightened, tears filling her eyes. Because he didn't just say it once. He meant it every time. Something inside her broke loose and she reached for him, her fingers trembling as they touched his hand. Cole covered her hand with his, warm and sure, and for the first time in her life she didn't flinch. The nights grew colder as autumn crept in, the wind howling against the cabin walls, but inside, warmth spread between them. Lila began to laugh, soft, uncertain at first, then fuller, until the sound filled the small cabin like sunlight. Cole found himself smiling more than he had in years, his eyes softening whenever he looked at her. They cooked together, walked the valley trails, and shared stories by the fire. Slowly, Lila began to tell him pieces of her past. The man who had caged her with promises, and then broke her with cruelty. The loneliness that had carved her into something hollow. Cole listened, never interrupting, never pitying. When she faltered, he reached for her hand, grounding her with the quiet strength of his touch. But the West was never a place where peace lasted long. One afternoon, as the sun hung high and Cole worked outside mending the fence, Lila stood by the porch, her dress whipping in the wind. She saw dust rising on the horizon. Riders. Her chest tightened, her breath catching. Cole straightened, his eyes narrowing as the figures grew closer. He knew before he saw their faces. Trouble had come. The men reined in near the cabin, their leader dismounting with a sneer that curdled the air. Lila's heart stopped when she recognized him. The man she had fled, the man who had made her believe she was nothing. His smile was cruel, his voice slick with venom. "Lila," he drawled, his eyes crawling over her like a sickness. "You thought you could run from me? You're mine." Lila shook her head, her hands clutching the porch rail so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her voice trembled but held steel she didn't know she had. "I was never yours." The man laughed, a hollow, ugly sound, and turned his gaze to Cole. "And who are you, cowboy? Think you can steal what belongs to me?" Cole's hand rested on the grip of his revolver, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. "She doesn't belong to you. Not now, not ever. She's free." The air thickened, the other riders shifting uneasily, sensing the storm about to break. The man sneered, his hand twitching toward his gun. Lila's breath caught, fear flooding her veins. But before she could cry out, Cole moved. The world slowed in that moment, the crack of gunfire splitting the air, the echo rolling across the valley like thunder. The man staggered, his eyes wide in shock before he crumpled to the dust. His cruelty ended in an instant. The other riders looked to one another, fear flashing in their eyes. And without their leader, they turned tail, spurring their horses and vanishing in a cloud of dust. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the sound of Lila's ragged breathing. She stumbled down the steps of the porch, her knees threatening to give way, but Cole caught her before she fell. His arms wrapped around her, steady and sure, holding her against his chest. She wept, her tears soaking into his shirt, her body trembling with the release of years of fear. He pressed his lips to her hair, whispering softly, "It's over. You're safe." She clung to him, her voice breaking as she whispered, "You meant it, didn't you? When you said forever." Cole pulled back just enough to meet her gaze, his eyes burning with truth. "I meant every word. You've never shared a bed, Lila, but from this day on, you'll share mine. Not for a night, not for a season, forever." Her tears turned to a shaky smile, and she nodded, her heart finally believing what it had always longed for. That night, as they lay side by side beneath the warmth of a single blanket, Lila felt the weight of her past slip away. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the dark, because Cole was there, his arms around her, his promise a shield stronger than any wall. She had never shared a bed, but now she shared everything, her fear, her hope, her love, with the one man who had shown her she was worth keeping. In the quiet of the cabin, with the fire casting soft light across their faces, Cole whispered once more, the vow that had bound them together. "Then share mine forever." And she did. Their story became more than just survival. It became a testament that even in the hardest lands, love could be found, trust could be rebuilt, and two broken souls could heal together. For those of you listening now, remember this. No matter how dark your past, no matter how heavy your burdens, there is always a chance to begin again. Love and hope can rise even from the dust of despair. Stay with us, because more stories like this are waiting to be told. Subscribe to the channel, join the journey, and let these tales remind you that forever can begin in the most unexpected places.